The quantum stabilizers hummed their familiar tune as Jake Martinez pressed his face against the reinforced viewport, watching the swirling vortex of hyperspace gradually give way to normal space. 3 months aboard the Cosmic Wanderer had done nothing to diminish his fascination with faster-than-light travel, though his stomach still performed interesting acrobatics every time they dropped out of warp. The xenobiology lab around him buzzed with nervous energy as his colleagues made final preparations for what would undoubtedly go down in history as either humanity's greatest diplomatic triumph or its most spectacular failure. "Martinez, stop drooling on the viewport and help me calibrate these bioscanners," called Dr. Sarah Chen from across the lab, her voice carrying that particular edge that meant she was trying very hard not to think about the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. First contact with the Zephyrians had been established 6 months ago through a series of mathematical transmissions that had taken xenolinguists 3 weeks to decode. The message had been simple: "We accept your invitation to meet." Jake reluctantly pulled himself away from the mesmerizing star field and shuffled over to the scanning array, his mind still processing the anatomical data files he'd been studying for weeks. The Zephyrians, according to their own transmissions, were remarkably humanoid, bipedal, carbon-based, with similar organ arrangements and biological functions. The only notable physical differences were their elongated ears and what their medical data suggested was a more efficient cardiovascular system. He'd rehearsed the formal greeting protocols dozens of times, but something about the reality of meeting another sapient species made his usual social awkwardness feel amplified by several orders of magnitude. The irony wasn't lost on him that he could discuss the mating habits of Terran mollusks for hours without embarrassment, but the prospect of making small talk with aliens left him feeling like he might spontaneously combust. The main bay had been transformed for the occasion, with portable atmospheric processors ensuring optimal air composition for both species. Diplomatic banners hung from the bulkheads, and someone had even managed to polish the deck plating to a mirror shine. Jake found himself positioned in the second row of the reception committee, directly behind Ambassador Williams and her diplomatic team. The perfect vantage point for observation, he told himself, though he suspected his placement had more to do with keeping him safely away from any actual diplomatic responsibilities. The quantum teleportation platform began to glow with an eerie blue radiance, and Jake felt the familiar tingle of displaced atoms as the matter stream stabilized. The light intensified, casting dancing shadows across the assembled crew, and then, with a sound like crystalline wind chimes, 5 figures materialized on the platform. Jake's first thought was that the anatomical data had been woefully inadequate. The Zephyrians were indeed humanoid, but they possessed an otherworldly grace that no medical scan could have conveyed. Their skin had a subtle luminescence, as if lit from within, and their movements flowed with liquid precision. But it was their ears that truly captured his attention, not merely elongated, but delicately tapered and seeming to catch and reflect light in ways that suggested they might indeed serve functions beyond simple hearing. The lead figure stepped forward, her flowing robes shimmering with colors that seemed to exist just beyond the normal spectrum. When she spoke, her voice carried musical undertones that made Jake wonder if Zephyrian vocal cords operated on entirely different principles than human ones. "Greetings, children of Earth. I am Ambassador Lyra Ventura of the Zephyrian Science Collective. We come in the spirit of knowledge and peaceful exchange." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward to deliver the formal response he'd been practicing, but Jake found his attention wandering. Ambassador Lyra had positioned herself at a slight angle that gave him an excellent view of her profile, and his scientist's mind couldn't help but catalog the subtle differences in bone structure, the way her elongated ears moved almost imperceptibly as she listened, the fascinating biomechanical implications of her species' obvious physical adaptations. "The biomechanical structure of their posterior region is absolutely fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint," he whispered to Dr. Chen, or at least thought he was whispering. The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the soft hum of the life support systems. Every human face in the bay had turned various shades of pale, while the Zephyrian delegation exchanged what appeared to be amused glances. Captain Rodriguez looked like a man watching his career disappear into a black hole, and Ambassador Williams seemed to be calculating the diplomatic ramifications of spacing her xenobiology team. Ambassador Lyra turned slowly, her silver eyes finding Jake's with unsettling precision. For a moment that felt like several geological epochs, they regarded each other across the suddenly cavernous space of the bay. Then, to everyone's amazement, she tilted her head in what was unmistakably curiosity rather than offense. "Would you care to elaborate on that scientific assessment, Dr. Martinez?" she asked, her voice carrying notes of genuine interest that somehow made the situation even more surreal. Jake's mouth opened and closed several times, producing no sound, while his brain scrambled for any response that might salvage what remained of his dignity and humanity's reputation. Around him, he could feel the collective held breath of two species waiting to see if first contact would be remembered as a triumph of interstellar diplomacy or the day a xenobiologist accidentally started a war by commenting on an alien ambassador's anatomy. Jake's brain finally engaged, though he suspected it might be running on emergency power. "Well, that is to say, from a purely anatomical perspective." He cleared his throat, acutely aware that every word was being recorded for posterity and possibly as evidence in his court-martial. The evolutionary adaptations evident in Zephyrian physiology suggest a fascinating divergence from typical humanoid development patterns. Ambassador Lyra's expression remained one of polite scientific interest, which somehow made everything worse. "Please, continue. Your initial observation regarding posterior biomechanical structure was intriguing." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward with the desperate look of a man trying to prevent an interstellar incident. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion in a more appropriate." "Actually," Lyra interrupted smoothly, "I find Dr. Martinez's approach refreshingly direct. On Zephyros Prime, we consider honest anatomical observation to be a form of respectful acknowledgement. Your scientist has complemented our species' evolutionary success." She paused, her silver eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "Though I must say, his methodology could use some refinement." The tension in the bay shifted from impending diplomatic disaster to confused relief. Jake felt his face burning with embarrassment, but Ambassador Lyra's unexpected response had opened a conversational door he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to walk through. Thank you," Jake managed. "I was actually noting the implications of bipedal locomotion efficiency in your species. The structural adaptations for weight distribution and—" Yes," Lyra nodded thoughtfully. "We have observed similar curiosities about human anatomy. For instance, your auditory appendages are remarkably compact. It's fascinating how you manage to perceive acoustic variations with such limited surface area." Dr. Chen snorted, quickly covering it with a cough. Several crew members exchanged glances, and Jake realized that he'd somehow stumbled into the galaxy's first interspecies roast session. "Our ears work perfectly fine, thank you," Jake replied, then immediately wondered if he'd just insulted an alien ambassador. "I mean, they're adequate for our environmental needs." "Of course," Lyra agreed solemnly. "Adequate is certainly adequate. Though I confess curiosity about how you compensate for the obvious limitations. Do you perhaps possess enhanced visual acuity? Or stronger olfactory capabilities?" Captain Rodriguez cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should move this fascinating discussion to the conference room. We have prepared a formal welcome presentation." "An excellent suggestion," Lyra replied. "Dr. Martinez, would you care to join the scientific exchange? I believe your unique observational skills might prove valuable." As they moved toward the conference room, Jake found himself walking beside the Zephyrian ambassador, acutely aware that their conversation had somehow become the centerpiece of first contact protocols. The other Zephyrian delegates flanked them, their expressions suggesting they found the entire interaction highly entertaining. "I must ask," Lyra said conversationally, "is it customary among your species to begin scientific discourse with anatomical commentary? Your approach is quite innovative." "Not exactly," Jake admitted. "Actually, it's more like career suicide, but apparently I'm pioneering new diplomatic techniques." One of the other Zephyrian delegates made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species uses humor as a social lubricant," she observed. "Fascinating. On Zephyros, we employ harmonic frequencies to achieve similar emotional regulation." You mean you literally sing your problems away? Dr. Chen asked, catching up to the group. In a manner of speaking, the delegate replied. Though I suspect your approach is more efficient. Humor requires significantly less vocal training. The conference room had been prepared with both human and Zephyrian seating arrangements, though Jake noticed the alien furniture seemed to accommodate their longer ears with subtle design modifications. As they settled into their seats, he found himself directly across from Ambassador Lyra, who was regarding him with continued scientific interest. Now then, Captain Rodriguez began, activating the holographic display system. We've prepared a comprehensive overview of human civilization, including our scientific achievements, cultural diversity, and... Fascinating, Lyra interrupted, studying Jake rather than the elaborate presentation. Dr. Martinez, I'm curious about your earlier assessment. What specific biomechanical advantages did you observe? For comparative xenobiology purposes, of course. Jake glanced around the table, noting that everyone seemed to be waiting for his response with varying degrees of anticipation and horror. Well, the Zephyrian skeletal structure appears optimized for both stability and flexibility. The spinal alignment suggests superior balance mechanisms, and the gluteal muscle development indicates enhanced locomotive efficiency. Lyra nodded approvingly. You noticed the secondary stabilization system. Most species overlook that adaptation. She leaned forward slightly. And what of our cranial modifications? Any observations regarding cognitive implications? Jake felt like he was being tested, though he wasn't sure if passing or failing would be better for his long-term survival. The enlarged auditory structures suggest enhanced sensory processing capabilities, possibly extending beyond normal acoustic ranges. There might be electromagnetic sensitivity, or even quantum field detection abilities. Quite perceptive, another Zephyrian delegate commented. Though you missed the tertiary neural pathways entirely. There are tertiary pathways? Jake asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his social anxiety. Indeed, Lyra smiled, and Jake noticed her teeth had a subtle opalescent quality. Our ear structures house additional neural clusters that process quantum fluctuations. It's how we navigate hyperspace without technological assistance. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Chen leaned forward. You mean you can naturally perceive quantum fields? Can't you? Lyra asked, seeming genuinely surprised. How do you find your way through space without sensing quantum currents? Very carefully, Captain Rodriguez muttered, and with extremely expensive navigation computers. That explains the rather crude approach to faster-than-light travel we observed, another Zephyrian noted. Your ship's quantum harmonics are quite chaotic. It must be terribly uncomfortable. You can hear our engines? Jake asked. Here is inadequate terminology, Lyra explained. We perceive the quantum distortions your propulsion system creates. It's rather like, imagine if your vision could only see in primary colors, and then someone showed you a rainbow through a kaleidoscope. That actually explains a lot about why first contact took so long, Dr. Chen observed. You probably thought we were quantum-deaf primitives stumbling around space. The thought had occurred to us, Lyra admitted. Though your persistence was admirable. Clumsy, but admirable. Jake found himself laughing despite the diplomatic implications. So when I accidentally commented on Zephyrian anatomy, you probably thought it was typical human bluntness? Actually, Lyra replied, her eyes sparkling with what was definitely amusement now, I thought it was refreshingly honest. Most species spend considerable time dancing around obvious physical differences. Your direct approach suggested either remarkable confidence or spectacular social incompetence. Definitely the latter, Jake confirmed. Which makes it all the more endearing, Lyra concluded, and Jake felt his face heating up again, though this time for entirely different reasons. The next morning found Jake in the xenobiology lab, hunched over a quantum microscope while trying to analyze Zephyrian cellular samples. His concentration kept wavering between the fascinating alien biology and replaying every mortifying moment of yesterday's diplomatic encounter. The cell structures before him defied conventional understanding. They seemed to exist in a state of quantum superposition, shifting between configurations faster than his equipment could track. Having trouble with the samples? Lyra's voice made him jump, nearly knocking over a rack of specimen containers. She stood in the laboratory doorway, having somehow entered without triggering any of the security sensors. How did you? The biolocks should have. Jake gestured helplessly at the sealed entrance. Quantum tunneling, Lyra explained casually, stepping into the lab. Your security systems are designed for classical physics. They don't account for probability-based matter displacement. Jake stared at her. You can quantum tunnel through solid matter. Only short distances, and it gives me terrible headaches, she admitted, moving to examine his equipment setup. Your microscope is calibrated incorrectly for quantum state observation. The temporal synchronization is off by several microseconds. Temporal synchronization. Lyra reached over him to adjust the controls, her elongated ears almost brushing his shoulder. Zephyrian cells exist across multiple time streams simultaneously. You're trying to observe them in linear time, which is like attempting to understand a symphony by listening to individual notes in isolation. The microscope display flickered, and suddenly the chaotic cellular activity resolved into elegant, flowing patterns. Jake watched in amazement as the cells seemed to dance through spacetime, their movements following quantum probability waves he'd never imagined possible. That's incredible, he breathed. How do you maintain cellular cohesion across temporal variance? The same way you maintain it across spatial variance, Lyra replied, settling onto a nearby stool. Though I suppose that's not particularly helpful, since you don't consciously control spatial cohesion either. Right, because we're quantum-deaf primitives stumbling around the universe, Jake said, then immediately wondered if that counted as self-deprecating humor or accidental self-insult. Primitives, perhaps, but entertainingly so, Lyra smiled. Your species compensates for quantum insensitivity with remarkable ingenuity. This microscope, for instance, it's a cleverly brute force approach to quantum observation. Brute force? You're essentially hitting quantum particles with larger quantum particles until something measurable happens. It's like trying to study butterfly wings by throwing rocks at them, but somehow you've made it work. Jake considered this. That's either the most insulting or most impressive thing anyone's ever said about human technology. Both, I think, Lyra replied cheerfully. Your determination to understand the universe despite sensory limitations is quite admirable. Most species with your level of quantum blindness never make it past their home solar system. Quantum blindness, Jake repeated. Is that the official Zephyrian term for our condition? Actually, the literal translation is more like temporally monocular, but your language lacks the necessary quantum linguistic structures for precise meaning transfer. Dr. Chen chose that moment to enter the lab, stopping short when she saw Lyra. Ambassador, I didn't realize you were. How did you get past the security locks? Quantum tunneling, Jake and Lyra said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. Of course it is, Chen muttered. Jake, we've got a problem. The navigation computer is throwing quantum stability errors, and engineering thinks it might be related to having Zephyrian quantum fields aboard. Something about resonance interference. Lyra frowned. Your ship's quantum harmonics are being disrupted by our presence. That shouldn't be possible unless. She paused, her expression growing concerned. Dr. Martinez, show me your propulsion system specifications. I'm not sure that's, Jake began. Now, please, Lyra interrupted, her casual demeanor suddenly replaced by professional urgency. If your quantum containment fields are destabilizing, this ship could experience catastrophic temporal displacement. The words, catastrophic temporal displacement, had a wonderfully motivating effect on Jake's security concerns. He quickly pulled up the propulsion schematics on his workstation, noting how Lyra's ears seemed to twitch as she studied the technical readouts. This is worse than I thought, she said finally. Your quantum field generators are operating in direct opposition to our natural biorhythms. It's like trying to tune two instruments that exist in completely different octaves. Can we fix it? Chen asked. Possibly, but it would require recalibrating your entire quantum matrix to harmonize with Zephyrian frequency patterns. The engineering implications are. Lyra paused, seemingly calculating. Actually, it's quite elegant in its complexity. Your species might accidentally achieve quantum consciousness through technological brute force. Accidentally achieve what now? Jake asked. Quantum consciousness, the ability to perceive multiple probability states simultaneously. It's how we navigate spacetime, process complex temporal data, and avoid walking into walls in the dark. We have flashlights for that last one, Chen pointed out. Another example of technological compensation for biological limitations, Lyra nodded approvingly. Though quantum consciousness would eliminate the need for artificial illumination entirely. The ship's communication system crackled to life. All department heads to the bridge immediately. We're experiencing major system failures across multiple decks. Lyra stood with fluid grace. Dr. Martinez, I'll need your assistance. Your understanding of human quantum technology, combined with my knowledge of temporal harmonics, might prevent this ship from accidentally achieving temporal non-existence. Temporal non-existence. Jake squeaked. It's less dramatic than it sounds, Lyra assured him as they hurried toward the bridge. You'd simply cease to exist across all possible timelines simultaneously. Very tidy, really. That doesn't sound less dramatic at all. Perhaps drama is culturally relative, Lyra mused. On Zephyros Prime, temporal non-existence is considered a peaceful way to end one's contribution to the universe. Though admittedly, it's usually voluntary. The bridge was in controlled chaos when they arrived. Warning lights flashed across multiple control panels, and Jake could hear the quantum drives cycling through increasingly unstable harmonic patterns. Captain Rodriguez looked like a man watching his ship slowly dissolve around him. Ambassador, thank God, he said as they approached. Our engineers think your presence is somehow interfering with our quantum containment systems. It's not interference, Lyra corrected. It's quantum discord. Your ship's artificial quantum field is trying to synchronize with our natural ones, but the frequency variance is creating temporal feedback loops. Can you fix it? Rodriguez asked. We can, Lyra replied, glancing at Jake. But it will require Dr. Martinez to temporarily interface with our quantum biorhythms. He'll need to become a living bridge between human technology and Zephyrian biology. That sounds dangerous, Jake said. Only if you're afraid of temporarily existing in 17 different probability states simultaneously, Lyra replied. Though I should mention that the process might permanently alter your quantum perception. You could develop rudimentary quantum consciousness. Jake stared at her. You're saying I might accidentally evolve? Accidentally evolve into something that can hear the universe singing, Lyra confirmed. The side effects include enhanced spatial awareness, improved navigation abilities, and the occasional tendency to walk through walls when not paying attention. Walk through walls. Quantum tunneling becomes instinctive once you develop quantum consciousness. Very convenient, though it does make privacy somewhat challenging. The ship shuddered around them, and several control panels sparked ominously. Jake looked at the chaos, then at Lyra's expectant expression, then at Captain Rodriguez's desperate face. What do I need to do? He asked. The quantum resonance chamber hummed with an energy that Jake could feel in his bones, though he suspected that after today's procedure, the sensation might become permanent. Lyra stood beside the interface console, her elongated ears practically vibrating with concentration as she monitored the harmonic frequencies that would soon rewire his perception of reality. Remember, she said, making final adjustments to the quantum field generators, once the synchronization begins, you'll experience temporal multiplicity. Try not to panic when you suddenly exist in several probability states simultaneously. Define several, Jake asked, strapping himself into the interface chair. 17, give or take a few depending on quantum flux variations, Lyra replied cheerfully. Though one of those states involves you deciding not to go through with this procedure, so really it's only 16. That's not as reassuring as you might think. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the communication system. Bridge to quantum lab. We're showing critical instability in drives 3 and 7. Whatever you're planning to do, do it fast. Lyra nodded to Jake. Ready? Absolutely not, Jake replied. Let's do this. The activation sequence began with a sound like crystalline bells being played by mathematical equations. Jake felt the first wave of quantum energy wash over him, and suddenly he could perceive the ship's quantum field as a living, breathing entity struggling to maintain cohesion. More disturbing was his newfound ability to see the probability cloud surrounding every object in the room, showing him all the potential ways they might exist. Fascinating, Lyra observed, studying her instruments. Your neural pathways are adapting faster than expected. Most species require several hours to achieve basic quantum consciousness. Is that good or bad? Jake asked, then realized he'd asked the question in 17 different probability states, each with slightly different vocal inflections. Definitely good, Lyra confirmed. Now, can you perceive the ship's quantum matrix? Jake closed his eyes, or rather, most of his probability states closed their eyes while a few kept them open for safety. The cosmic wanderer spread out before his new perception like a vast, shimmering web of interconnected energy patterns. He could see the quantum drive struggling against harmonic discord, their artificial frequencies clashing with the natural biorhythms of the Zephyrian delegation. I can see it, he said, his voice echoing slightly across multiple time streams. The drives are trying to synchronize but they're off by, wait, that's not a frequency problem. Someone calibrated the quantum containment fields using the wrong mathematical constants. Wrong how? Lyra asked. They used pi to 15 decimal places, but quantum mechanics requires at least 23 for stable field generation, Jake explained, simultaneously calculating corrections across multiple probability states. It's like trying to build a house with a ruler that's missing half its measurements. Can you fix it? Already am, Jake replied, reaching out with his newly expanded consciousness to gently adjust the quantum field parameters. The ship's drives responded immediately, their chaotic harmonics smoothing into elegant mathematical progressions. Though I should mention that I can now see through walls, which is going to make privacy aboard this ship interesting. The quantum energy began to stabilize, and Jake felt his multiple probability states slowly converging back toward a single timeline. The sensation was like 17 different versions of himself having a heated discussion about which reality to inhabit, then finally agreeing on a compromise. Bridge to quantum lab, Captain Rodriguez's voice carried obvious relief. Whatever you did, it worked. All systems showing green across the board. We've successfully synchronized human technology with Zephyrian biorhythms, Lyra reported. Dr. Martinez now possesses rudimentary quantum consciousness, though the full implications won't be apparent for several weeks. Jake carefully stood up, noting that his spatial awareness had expanded considerably. He could perceive the quantum states of everything in the room, from the probability cloud surrounding the equipment to the fascinating temporal echoes that trailed behind Lyra's movements. How do you feel? She asked. Like I've been wearing a blindfold my entire life and someone just turned on the lights, Jake replied. Also, I think I can hear the universe humming. Is that normal? Perfectly normal, Lyra assured him. The universe does hum. It's generally considered quite pleasant once you get used to it. Over the following days, as the diplomatic mission reached its conclusion, Jake found himself spending increasing amounts of time with Lyra, ostensibly for quantum consciousness adjustment therapy, but really because her presence helped him navigate his expanded perceptions without accidentally walking through bulkheads. His newfound abilities proved useful in unexpected ways. He could now detect quantum instabilities before they became dangerous, navigate the ship's corridors in complete darkness, and occasionally glimpse potential futures where various diplomatic scenarios played out. The irony, Lyra observed one evening as they sat in the observation lounge watching hyperspace swirl past, is that your accidental comment about Zephyrian anatomy led to you accidentally evolving beyond normal human limitations. I've been thinking about that, Jake said, unconsciously perceiving 17 different versions of the conversation while focusing on the most probable outcome. Maybe it wasn't entirely accidental. I mean, what are the odds that a xenobiologist with a talent for embarrassing himself would end up in exactly the right place to trigger first contact protocols? In a quantum universe, all possibilities exist simultaneously, Lyra replied. Perhaps some version of reality required a socially awkward scientist to bridge the gap between our species. Or maybe I'm just really good at falling upward, Jake suggested. When the time came for the Zephyrian delegation to depart, Jake found himself facing the strange reality of saying goodbye to someone who had fundamentally changed his perception of existence. The formal ceremonies were held in the main bay, with both crews gathered to mark the successful conclusion of humanity's first diplomatic mission. Dr. Martinez, Ambassador Lyra said as the departure preparations neared completion, I have a proposal for you. Please tell me it doesn't involve more accidental evolution, Jake replied. Nothing accidental about this, she smiled. The Zephyrian Science Collective is organizing a comparative xenobiology expedition to study evolutionary patterns across multiple star systems. We need a human perspective, and specifically, we need someone with quantum consciousness who can serve as a bridge between our different approaches to scientific observation. Jake stared at her. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you the opportunity to study the universe from a perspective no human has ever possessed, Lyra corrected. Also, the expedition ship has excellent quantum shielding, so you won't accidentally phase through the hull during sleep cycles. That's, actually a significant concern I hadn't considered, Jake admitted. Captain Rodriguez approached, having overheard the conversation. Dr. Martinez, if you're interested in a position, Starfleet Command has already approved the exchange program. Apparently, having a quantum-conscious human working with alien scientists is considered a diplomatic priority. Plus, Dr. Chen added, joining the group, someone needs to make sure you don't accidentally tunnel into a star or something equally ridiculous. Jake looked around at the assembled faces, human and Zephyrian alike, and realized that his embarrassing comment about alien anatomy had somehow led to the most significant opportunity of his career. More than that, it had led to a connection with someone who saw his social awkwardness not as a liability, but as a refreshingly direct approach to interspecies communication. Ambassador Lyra, he said formally, then grinned. I accept your proposal, and I promise to make only scientifically relevant observations about anatomy during the expedition. I was rather hoping you'd continue with your refreshingly direct commentary, Lyra replied. Though perhaps with slightly better timing. As the Zephyrian delegation prepared to depart via quantum teleportation, Jake found himself equipped with a quantum communication device that would allow real-time contact across interstellar distances. The technology was beyond human understanding, but then again, so was his ability to exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. One final question, he said to Lyra as the teleportation sequence began. That first day, when I made that comment about, well, you know, were you actually offended, or were you just amused by human social awkwardness? Honestly? Lyra's eyes sparkled with familiar mischief. I was impressed that you noticed our evolutionary advantages so quickly. Most species take months to appreciate Zephyrian biomechanical efficiency. So I was right about the anatomical observations. Completely accurate, she confirmed. Though your delivery could still use some work. 6 months later, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Zephyrian research vessel Quantum Dancer, watching a binary star system dance across 17 different probability states while the universe hummed a quantum lullaby in his expanded consciousness. His ability to perceive multiple realities simultaneously had proven invaluable for comparative xenobiology, allowing him to observe how different species evolved across various potential timelines. Dr. Martinez, Lyra's voice carried the warm familiarity of shared discovery as she joined him at the viewport. Are you ready for today's expedition to the methane worlds of Kepler, for 42? Absolutely, Jake replied, then paused. Though I should probably warn you that my quantum consciousness is picking up some fascinating biomechanical adaptations in the local fauna. I might accidentally make scientifically accurate observations about their anatomy. I'm counting on it, Lyra laughed, the sound harmonizing with the quantum frequencies that surrounded them. After all, your refreshingly direct approach to xenobiology is exactly why we invited you aboard. Jake smiled, watching the stars shift through probability space while the universe continued its eternal quantum symphony. Sometimes, he reflected, the most embarrassing moments led to the most extraordinary possibilities.